Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is 9700 Biology, November 16, paper 1-3, and these are the further questions which I've done the first video on this, and this is the second video, and this will cover question 21 to 40. Starting with question 21, first video had 1 to 20, now we have 21 to 40. Diagram shows the nucleotide sequence of a small section of a gene which is transcribed. GCG, so I would always sort of, this would be my way of doing it would be I would sort of underline the first three, then the next three, then I would underline the next three, and then the last three. I would sort of maybe outline them. And the table shows amino acids coded for by 10 mRNA codons. You remember mRNA codons, medical certificate. So mRNA always has codons. So you got to make some sort of a mnemonic to remember it that mRNA has codons and tRNA has anti-codon. So there's a T in both of them. tRNA anti-T codon. tRNA. Okay, so mRNA codon and amino acid. Please remember codon is only on mRNA. It's not on tRNA, it's not on DNA. Please be very clear about that. So they gave you this AAG results in LYS lysine, ACG gives you THR, this gives you ARG, CCG gives you this, and so on and so forth. Now pause it here, have a look, go through the question. If you have your MCQ booklet, first do this paper and then start doing this paper. And then it says, what is the order of the 4 amino acids in the polypeptide translated from this small section of a gene? Now, I always tell my students is that you have to figure out, first you have to figure out the DNA, and then you have to figure out the mRNA. So if the DNA is GCG, the mRNA is CGC. If the DNA is CGC, the mRNA is GCG. So you are going to look at for all these, what is the order of the 4 amino acids? So GCG, if it was in DNA, now this is the diagram to look of a small section of a gene which is transcribed. So this has to be the DNA. So DNA to mRNA will be CGC. Now where is CGC? Let's look at that. Now I've circled all of these. And you know it had to be ARG. So of course, it was very easy to do it, but I mean, you got to understand it. I don't like saying that it was easy because it seems I'm very condescending, but what I meant was that how are you going to figure it out? So you got to DNA and mRNA, and then, of course, the mRNA was the one which was going to give you the clue what was going to be first, because if you'd figure out the mRNA, then you could figure out the amino acid. And this is what I have given you with the clues for it. So the first one was, if you look at the question, the first one was GCG, here that is. And the second one was CGC, which I've given you here. And GCG I've given you here. So it was ARG had to be the first, but then ARG is the first here as well. Then you have to figure out the second one, which was ALA. Because the second was CGC and CGC was GCG. So GCG was here. Pause the video. Have a look. Understand it. DNA to mRNA. They were asking you to figure out from the DNA what would be the mRNA. And then from the mRNA what would be the amino acid. And you must know the names of the amino acid. You must be familiar with all this LYS, THR, ARG, PRO. There's an index at the end of the book which shows you all these names, and you should always be familiar with these names. Now looking at question 22, the following events occur during transcription. Transcription is DNA to mRNA. Bonds break between complementary bases. Yes, the DNA, between the DNA double helix, bonds break. Then bonds form between the DNA, the template strand of the DNA, and the mRNA. Then the sugar phosphate bonds form. Then free nucleotides pair with the complementary nucleotides. Now, before the mRNA molecule leaves the nucleus, which events will have occurred twice? Which events will have occurred twice? Why 1 and 2? Why was it 1 and 2? The reason being is that it was 1 and 2 because one bonds break between complementary bases. So first of all, the DNA unzips. So bonds break between complementary bases, and then the new bonds form between the mRNA. And then again these bonds break. And why 2? Why? Because you see, then again the original DNA strands will again form. So 1 and 2 bonds break between complementary bases and then bonds form between complementary bases. And I'll go back to this diagram at the end of the video, which is of course given to you at the end of it. I give you all these diagrams again and I just revise that with you all. Then question 23, it says which statements about water movement in plants are correct? Water cannot pass through cellulose. Cell wall is fully permeable to water. You know that. Water can pass through lignin. No, water cannot pass through the Casparian strip. So which statements is correct? So it has to be D, 2 and 3 only. Because water does, everybody knows the cell wall is fully permeable. And so this was incorrect. Water cannot pass through cellulose. Question 24, the diagram shows transverse section of parts of a plant, leaf, stem, root. In the transverse section, which tissue transports water and which tissue transports sucrose? Now everybody knows 532 is phloem and the rest of it was simply, so you had to figure that out, and this was D was the answer. Please pause this here, have a look at it and understand it, how this D is the answer. And coming to the next question, 25. Which diagram represents the effect of atmospheric humidity on the rate of transpiration? You know, rate of transpiration, more humid, what will happen? As more water vapors outside, then of course the gradient is disturbed. We have to have lesser water vapors outside, so less humidity, more the rate of transpiration. So of course the answer was B, the rate of transpiration is decreasing as the humidity is increasing. Humidity is increasing in this direction and the rate of transpiration is increasing in this direction. So please understand why the answer was B. Then it says which part of a plant have plasmodesmata, companion cells, phloem sieve, root hair cell? And the answer to that was A, 1, 2 and 3. So companion cells, phloem sieve tube elements. And of course, coming to the above question, we've talked about the rate of the humidity and transpiration. So you can see how this graph is also explaining that part of the question which we've just done. Humid atmosphere, rate of transpiration, factors affecting it is contains a lot of reduction of water potential between the airspace. Uh, Rate of transpiration decreases, low humidity increases rate of transpiration. Question 27, the following are all structural components of blood vessels. All. Collagen fiber, elastic fiber, endothelial cells, smooth muscle cells. Which row shows the component in an artery and vein? You know endothelium is present in all. So it had to be C because they're all present in all of them. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Of course, in varying degrees, but they're present in all. This diagram is going to be explained at the end as well. Then we have question 28. Now, if you look at question 28, scientists have shown that oxygen dissociation curves for hemoglobin of smaller mammals are to the right, those of the larger mammals. What does this suggest about the hemoglobin of smaller mammals? Of course, it unloads oxygen more easily because they've given you the question that oxygen smaller is to the right. So the oxygen dissociation curve is to the right means, so that means then you have to just understand the dissociation curve graphs and have a look at those again and revise those. Then coming to question 29. Question 29, which row should be correct for the average blood pressure in different parts of the human circulatory system? Highest blood pressure, lowest average blood pressure, and It says right atrium, artery in the arm, vein in the arm, capillary in the arm. Of course, the clue, of course, was that the artery in the arm would have the highest, and then the capillary in the arm, and then the vein in the arm, and then the right atrium, where, of course, the pressure is greatly reduced because all this blood is going to return to the right atrium. You see, question 30 was again a bit of a was trying to check how confused you can become. Which statements are correct? The activity of carbonic anhydrase increases the hydrogen ion concentration in blood passing through active tissue. Carbon dioxide can react with hemoglobin red blood cell to form carboxyhemoglobin. Remember, carbon dioxide doesn't form, it forms carbaminohemoglobin. And carboxy is carbon monoxide. People who smoking, carboxyhemoglobin. So this was actually checking your vocabulary. When hemoglobin binds with the hydrogen ion, its affinity for oxygen decreases. So the answer to this was 1 and 3 only, and buzz 2 was all rubbish. It was total rubbish. Then question 31. The diagram shows pressure changes during the cardiac cycle, which arrow indicates atrial systole. Again, cardiac cycle needs to be revised. I'll just do that. And this graph you can see here, atrial systole. The A wave occurs when the atrium contracts, increasing atrial pressure. Blood arriving at the heart flows back up the jugular vein, causing the first wave in the jugular venous pulse. Ventricular pressure is not raised. Okay, so I mean, this is a little more confusing for you if you're sort of finding it a little difficult. But I would advise you to revise the cardiac cycle and then come back to this question once again. Question 32, the image shown is a photomicrograph of a transverse section of part of the gas exchange system. What describes the image? A thin inner layer of ciliated epithelial cells on top of a layer containing cartilage and supported by elastic fibers. A very thin epithelial lining with walls containing elastic fibers surrounded by many blood vessels. An inner layer of ciliated epithelial and goblet cells on top of elastic fibers is supported by an outer layer consisting of blocks of cartilage. An inner layer of ciliated epithelium and goblet cells on top of loose tissue with mucus glands supported by an outer layer of cartilage. Now, the gas exchange chapter needs to be revised if you really want to understand this MCQ and understand why C is the answer. Then we come to the table list some of the effects of smoking, which row shows the effect of nicotine and carbon monoxide. This, of course, has been removed from the 2022 syllabus, so those students who are doing that should not do this question. The table lists some of the effects of smoking, which row shows the effect of nicotine and carbon monoxide. Nicotine causes vasoconstriction, increases blood pressure. Carbon monoxide combines with hemoglobin, forming carboxyhemoglobin. Which statement about chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is correct? The disease can often be reversed by treatment. The disease occurs in people of all ages. The patient coughs a lot, bringing up mucus. The patient's symptoms change over time. And here I've given you a list of the symptoms of COPD, and I'm sure you can have a look at that. Next question is 35. Which row is correct? We have disease, we have pathogen, we have method of infection. You know cholera is caused by a bacterium, and it is a foodborne and waterborne. Malaria is not caused by a prokaryote, it's caused by a protoctist. Plasmodium is not a prokaryote. Please remember that. Malaria is caused by a protoctist called Plasmodium, not a prokaryote, and protoctists are eukaryotes. Then measles is not caused by a bacterium, it's caused by a virus. This has also been removed from the 2022 syllabus. And tuberculosis is caused by a bacteria, TB. I always tell you to say, remember B for bacteria, B for bacteria. A bacteria is a prokaryote. So the answer to that was A. Then coming to question 36. What do pathogens of HIV/AIDS, malaria, and TB have in common? Now, AIDS is caused by a virus, malaria is caused by Plasmodium, and TB is caused by a bacteria. I've written that in red for you all to remember and revise. Question 36. The answer is they have It says not present. Now, what were the ticks and the crosses? The ticks and the crosses were not present in each causative agent. You know, virus does not have a cell membrane. Virus just has a protein coat, and it does not have any cytoplasm. They have genetic information. Yes, they have DNA. All three of them have DNA, and they have ribosomes. Virus, they have no ribosomes. Yes, Plasmodium and bacteria have ribosomes. So because they compared the virus, they expected you to know the differences between a virus. This is actually the first chapter, virus, prokaryote, and eukaryote, because Plasmodium is a eukaryote. So please understand, what are they asking you? They're asking you, this is a question from the first chapter. Then we have 37. Which factor might have contributed to the spread of HIV/AIDS? Few clinics, hospitals, insufficient education, HIV/AIDS. You've studied that, you know it in the diseases chapter. So you know why the others were all just BS. Beautiful story. Few clinics and hospitals, malnutrition, poor sanitation was all rubbish. Which event will occur following antigen antibody binding? Agglutination of the bacteria to reduce their spread, decrease susceptibility to phagocytosis, more helper T cells are activated, more plasma cells are cloned to produce more antigens. That's all wrong. Plasma cells do not produce antigens. Plasma B cells produce antibodies. And T cells actually release cytokines. So this was also wrong. So the answer to that was A. Then we come to 39. Now, if you look at question 39, which statements about macrophages are correct? More are found in tissues such as the lungs than in the blood. They have a role in antigen presentation. They can engulf pathogens, dust particles, and damaged body cells. To correct, all three are correct. So macrophages are the scavengers, and the other name for it is also sometimes we say sort of phagocytes. And then we have question 40. The graph shows the antibody concentration in the blood following vaccination and a booster vaccination 28 days later. We all are getting our corona vaccines, and we get it a few days later. We get the second dose, and the reason is so that more plasma B cells, and again sort of we revise it with them, and so that we have more memory B cells, and we have more memory cells, so that when the actual pathogen enters, then they will immediately convert to plasma B cells, make antibodies, kill the pathogen, and you do not suffer from the disease. So the graph shows the antibody concentration following vaccination. So vaccination, they've given you where the vaccination is taking place. They've given you where the booster vaccination is taking place, the time, and then of course they have given you this graph. This graph is a very typical graph for primary and secondary response, and I'm sure all of you remember this very well. And then it says which statements about the changes in antibody concentration are correct. So I'm just going to leave this graph on top and read this. Antibody concentration falls after the primary response because antibodies are broken down and are no longer being produced. Oh no, that's not the case. The antibodies, because now they are not making any more antibodies. It's actually the response has been shut down. The secondary response, so you have to understand, is antibody concentration falls after the primary response because antibodies are broken down and are no longer being produced. Yes, because they stop being produced. Secondary response is more rapid due to memory B cells produced from activated B cells in the primary response. And the secondary response lasts longer than because memory B cells live longer than the plasma B cells. So yes, all of these three are correct. And that is what you have to understand, is which statements about change are correct. Which statements about changes in the antibody concentration are correct. So the answer to this was, of course, that the answer is A, which is 1, 2, and 3. Now looking at this diagram, this is the help for question 22, transcription, making RNA. Please everybody revise this. I'm leaving it here for you to pause the video and have a look at it. Transcribed DNA strand template, untranscribed DNA strand coding strand, then synthesis of template. Why was that in the question 22, which was correct, why it was correct? So if you can understand that, I'm sure that will be a great help to all of you. So please pause the video here, have a look at this. Now this diagram for question 32 is, I've left this here for a reason, that I wanted to see the tracheal or the bronchial wall. It's been labeled. Respiratory epithelium. Of course, the other things are not in your syllabus, so I won't go into much. Goblet cells. GC is goblet cells. And then you have the hyaline cartilage, which I want you to see. And this is typically, this structure is cartilage cells, and that you must be able to pick this up. This is a very typical chondrocytes, and you need to be picking this up very readily. The goblet cells, you need to be noticing them also. You need to be looking at more diagrams to just type in the Google search goblet cells hyaline cartilage and have a look at it. And of course, you see a whole lot of diagrams on this. Then we come on to question 34. What are the symptoms of COPD? And these are the ones which I have given you, and you can have a look at this and revise this, and then we go and we can easily, you can do these questions whenever they come in the MCQs. And that finishes this MCQ paper. I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I hope this has helped. And please do write a comment on how I can improve these videos. I know I'm learning a lot from your comments, and it does help me a lot to see your comments. And thank you very much once again.